Let your body rest now. Take a long, slow breath in and gently let it out. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day's thoughts drift like fallen petals on a river. Close your eyes or let them grow heavy with each passing moment. Imagine yourself by the glow of a flickering fire, the scent of aged parchment and lavender wafting from a nearby shelf. During the long, frost-bound months of winter, it was customary for a suitor to sleep beside a potential bride to lie fully clothed, separated by a bolster or board, and talk through the night. In England there was a peculiar court held every summer called the Court of Love, where disputes of the heart were judged not by lords, but by ladies, often noble women, who ruled on whether a lover's actions were honorable or if a heart had been wrongly led astray. And they debated whether a stolen kiss at the maypole was treason or merely boldness. These courts, though more symbolic than legal, offered a rare space where women's voices held sway over matters of love. But for unattainable ladies, often married, high-born, and utterly out of reach, this tradition of courtly love was all about longing. The idea was that true love was purest when it could never be consummated. A racing heart at a glance, the nervous arrangement of hair, the fold of a letter read and reread beneath the sheets. Beneath the strange laws and rigid traditions, there pulsed a timeless ache, the desire to be seen, to be chosen, to be cherished. A knight might wear his lady's colors on his sleeve during a joust, yet never kiss her hand. He might write sonnets, deliver roses fast in her honor, all while she remained a distant dream on a high balcony. Strange, isn't it, to think that the height of romance was a love never touched? They would share secrets, poetry, hopes. Many weddings were conducted on church steps, not inside, as the sacred space was reserved for holy rites. Witnesses stood by as vows were exchanged in the open air. Rings were a luxury. Some couples simply exchanged clasped hands. A contract might be signed with a thumbprint or sealed with wax bearing the mark of a family crest. Then came the bedding ceremony, a custom both odd and communal. Family and friends would escort the newlyweds to bed, sometimes throwing flowers or grain, sometimes offering crude jokes and songs meant to ward off evil. Privacy was a rarity, modesty a gift, all under the knowing eyes of the girl's family. The belief was that talking through the night allowed love to blossom without the dangers of sin, and songs hummed while weaving in footsteps that paused just a moment too long beneath the same window each night. Mandrake root stirred into red wine, powdered rose petals mixed with cinnamon and cloves. There are more customs to uncover, more strange beliefs, and more stories tucked beneath the dusty pages of medieval hearts. These were meant to charm the heart, to awaken affection, or to ensure fidelity. Some worked only by suggestion. Others were strong enough to lull the senses or stir the blood. In the eyes of the church, this was dangerous magic, but in the hearts of the lonely, it was hope. Some couples kept hands folded, prayers whispered. Others broke rules behind closed shutters and prayed for forgiveness later. It was a ritual of proximity without touch, designed to both tempt and restrain. The wooden beams above your head creak gently with the weight of the thatched roof. It's a quiet evening in a world long gone. Let your mind slow to the rhythm of a crackling hearth as your thoughts melt into the soft lull of distant centuries. There were wandering minstrels who fell for the daughters of millers, and monks who left behind their vows for a glimpse of sun and a tavern girl's smile. There were strange tokens, 2 gifts, to speak for love when words would not do. A ring made of woven hair, a pouch of herbs tied with ribbon, a bit of embroidery stitched with initials in secret code. Even the scent of certain plants, like rosemary or violet, whispered messages when words might risk too much. Tonight we travel far into the tender, complicated, and often peculiar world of medieval love. This is a story not of battles or banners, but of glances across a marketplace, secret notes folded beneath floorboards, and the strange rules that bound hearts in velvet chains. Let go of the present. Let your breath guide you inward. Our story today begins in a quiet village nestled along the river bank of 12th century France. The fields are still damp with morning dew, and the first sounds of life rise with the chirping of larks and the distant creak of wagon wheels. In the center of the village, a cobbled square opens up beside the well, and each Saturday morning it fills with the bustle of market day. Young men bring barrels of cider or bushels of grain. Young women, cheeks powdered with flour from early bread baking, slip through the crowd, eyes watchful beneath linen veils. Marriage here is more than a union of affection. It's a transaction, a strategy, a duty, and once in a while, a whispered miracle of rebellion. You see, dating as we know it didn't exist in this world. Courtship, if you could even call it that, often began before the children had reached their 12th year. Families arranged matches long before hearts had a say. A noble daughter's dowry might include goats, a plot of fertile land, or silk imported from the East. A merchant son might win favor with the gift of a carved wooden comb or the promise of a better roof. And yet, even within these boundaries, rigid and stone like something delicate, loomed. There were rules, yes, but there were also loopholes. In some towns, young men and women took part in a tradition known as watching. Outside the towns, in more isolated villages, young lovers often met in secret, beneath the trees or beside the fields during harvest. But love, like the wind through the moors, did not always follow the laws of man. And then, of course, there were love potions. In dark kitchens, lit only by tallow candle, village women, sometimes midwives, sometimes labeled witches, prepared concoctions of honey, wine, and crushed herbs. In noble courts, troubadours composed chansons d'amour, love songs meant not for wives. Even marriage itself was not what we might picture. But even amid these curious customs, something universal lingered, a touch of the familiar. And in that candlelit world where time moved slowly and choices were few, love found ways to thrive in laughter behind market stalls. Let your breath settle now. Let your body relax into the softness of sheets or the hush of the room. We will walk further into this world together. Would you like me to continue? Let your body stay still now, and let your breathing grow slower. In and out. You are safe here, drifting in a room where time forgets to move, but to exchange glances, news, and secret hopes. Two people, not yet married but interested in one another, would agree to live together for a period of time, often a year and a day. They were not yet wed by the church, but the community recognized the pairing. A girl might wait months to see a boy again after a single shared dance at a feast. She might carry that moment with her like a jewel, tucking it between chapters of a song, or pressing it into memory each night before sleep. And when the church bells rang for holy days or festivals, hope stirred again, because in those rare moments of freedom on feast days, market festivals, or saints' processions, young people could speak, laugh, even touch. It was one of the only times they could steal a moment away from the watchful eyes of family and God. A traveling piper plays a slow reel, and the ale flows warm. Let the quiet of this imagined world wrap around you like a woolen cloak. Let the flickering lanterns and the scent of wood smoke guide you into dreams. Our story is far from over. We have yet to touch on the taboos, the rituals, and the secret meetings that shaped how hearts connected in a world ruled by rules, and ruled even more by longing. A girl in homespun linen meets the gaze of a boy with dust on his boots. They don't speak at first, just smile. She refills his mug with a steady hand. He lingers a bit too long when their fingers brush. It means nothing and everything. He returns the next night, and the next. Soon he offers a charm made of bone and string, carved in the shape of a bird. It is not gold, but it is something more. A promise that he'll return after the harvest, that she'll wait through winter's chill. These were the beginnings of medieval love, quiet, intentional, hidden. If after the trial period the couple still wished to wed, the union was formalized. If not, they parted. And yet, many couples who hand-fasted never bothered with a formal wedding. But more than that, it was a day of mischief and longing. A glance too long might cause scandal. A poem sent without permission could spark a duel. And yet, ladies of the court, those cloaked in brocade and pinned with jewels, were not passive dolls. They played love like chess. They arranged encounters. They sent favors. They deflected unwanted attention with polite cruelty. A dropped handkerchief could be a trap or a gift. A smile could destroy a reputation. Some women wielded charm like a weapon. Others used wit, humor, and mystery to make themselves unforgettable. In a world where their choices were limited, cleverness became power. In England and Wales, young lovers would sneak into the woods for greenwood marriages, symbolic unions blessed by nature. These secret encounters were rarely spoken of afterward, but they became part of the seasonal rhythm, a way for love to breathe where it was normally suffocated. The church frowned upon it. Parents turned a blind eye. And for centuries, May Day was the secret holiday of the heart. They lived as husband and wife, and in the eyes of neighbors, that was enough. It was practical, earthy, and surprisingly progressive for the times. In places like Norway and the Low Countries, premarital relations were often tolerated so long as they led to marriage. In fact, some betrothal ceremonies included what was called spousal vows, an exchange that was legally binding even without a priest. If witnessed by others, these vows could count as marriage. And if a child resulted, the law often required the couple to wed, but would still recognize the child as legitimate. It was messier than fairy tales, but it was real. And within that mess, love sometimes bloomed. A coin dropped in the basin is not always a wish for wealth. A girl might be promised at birth, betrothed by 10, and wed by 14. If her heart longed elsewhere, it hardly mattered. Marrying without consent could be punished as theft of property. But even here, some found a way. In Italy, during the 1300s, love letters became a secret lifeline. Couriers, often young boys or servants, risked much to deliver small folded parchments across city walls. These letters were often written in a kind of code, where fruit, flowers, and numbers stood in for feelings. A pear might mean, "I want to kiss you." A pomegranate meant loyalty. Red ink hinted at danger or urgency. A single pressed violet wrapped in cloth meant I dream of you. Sometimes it's a message one that only one pair of eyes is meant to see. Here, a young boy might leave a sprig of holly by the edge of the well. If it's taken before the bells toll for vespers, it means the girl has accepted his silent invitation. If it's still there by nightfall, well, it is never mentioned again. Shame in love was silent, but it lingered like fog. The fire is low but warm. The wind outside rattles the shutters gently, like a lullaby from the trees. In this quiet space, we return to a world where love and longing moved beneath layers of wool, behind veils and between lines of carefully written script. The world of medieval romance was not loud or fast. It was slow and cautious, shaped by rules both written and unwritten. And within those rules, people still fell deeply, hopelessly, imperfectly in love. Let us drift now to a small walled town in southern Germany, where young girls of marriageable age gather at the public fountain, not only to draw water. In the villages of Scotland, there was a curious courtship tradition called handfasting, but not all customs were so kind. In many parts of Europe, a father had near total control over his daughter's marriage, and dream they did. In a world without phones, without mirrors in every home, love lived in imagination. And then there was May Day. On the first morning of May, entire villages would wake before dawn to gather wildflowers and green boughs, decorating homes and barns in a celebration of spring. Back within castle walls, among the nobility, love was wrapped in elegance and danger. The concept of chastity was tangled with honor, particularly for women, but the truth was far less rigid than legend suggests. Imagine now a quiet tavern at dusk, tucked beneath the eaves of a thatched roof, where music hums low and candlelight flickers across wooden beams. Let yourself drift deeper now. Close your eyes once more, or let them remain heavy, softer, calmer. Feel the weight of your limbs sink just a little deeper into comfort. The trees grow thick and green here, the air smells of pine and damp moss, and somewhere nearby there is the soft splash of a stream over stone. Lovers often met in places like this, out of sight, out of view shot, out of reach of the rules. With Christian and Muslim kingdoms locked in tension, young lovers sometimes crossed religious and cultural boundaries in silence. In most parts of medieval Europe, the consent of the bride and groom was technically required, but only just. It wasn't uncommon for parents to pressure, bribe, or threaten their children into compliance. The art of courtly love, as it was called, followed specific rules, guidelines penned by poets and philosophers. Love must be secret. Love must be noble. Love must be intense, but restrained. You were not to kiss too soon, not to touch too freely, and never to admit love before it was certain. Men were expected to suffer with dignity, to prove themselves worthy through acts of valor or loyalty. The midnight rituals, the seasonal spells, and the strange ceremonies where love was tested, judged, or blessed by forces no one fully understood. Women, in turn, were to be gracious but distant, offering small encouragements while guarding their reputations like castles. It was a game of masks and metaphors, a performance, but it was also a way for those who had little freedom to express what lived inside them. And so many young people found ways to delay the inevitable. Being seen speaking to a boy alone, walking near the river at the wrong hour, or returning home with a ribbon tied in the wrong place. These things could spark gossip, and gossip was hard to undo. One of the most powerful customs, especially in rural areas, was called troth plighting. No matter the century, no matter the rules, love has always been like this, quiet, risky, sacred. It bends beneath the weight of custom. It hides inside songs and poems and letters. And even in a world where you couldn't choose who you married, there were still moments of choosing. Still moments where love happened anyway. A boy and girl might exchange a simple vow spoken aloud, hand in hand, often under the moon or beneath a tree. They would promise themselves to each other, sometimes in the presence of a friend, sometimes alone. These vows, though unofficial, were considered binding by many, and if they were broken, the community would remember. Hearts held one another accountable in ways that laws never could. So girls became fluent in discretion. A glance held a little longer. A song sung with a certain word repeated twice. A sleeve brushed against another in passing. These were the ways hearts touched when hands could not. Some would take refuge in religious orders, not necessarily because of deep belief, but because the nunnery or monastery offered a place to breathe. Others sought escape through traveling troops, pretending to be apprentices or servants just to get away from family contracts. And a few, just a lucky few, found clever allies. A sympathetic aunt, a priest who turned his head, a neighbor who offered shelter for an elopement. There were always cracks in the system. And love, like water, found them. A Moorish girl might meet the eyes of a Christian stable boy during a morning walk. A noble's daughter might listen to stories from a Jewish merchant as apprentice while visiting the marketplace. These were dangerous affections, impossible affections, and yet they happened. Behind curtains, across balconies, through shared glances and notes hidden in the folds of robes. Love, even when forbidden, found its way. In this part of the world, there was a belief that love whispered in the forest was protected by spirits, gentle beings who blessed young couples with luck, so long as they honored the land. Sometimes girls would braid small garlands of clover and hang them on branches. Sometimes boys would carve initials into the bark of the elder tree. She would dream of her future husband on the third night. Girls would rise quietly, barefoot on cold stone, broom in hand. They would sweep with slow, deliberate strokes, eyes half closed, heart half hopeful. On the third night, they'd sleep with dried lavender beneath their pillow, hoping the dream would come and that it would make sense. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't, but always the hope was enough. And if those carvings remained by the next season, the love was considered true. If they faded, well, some said it was the forest's way of choosing. With every breath, you drift further away from the modern world and further into the gentle hush of another century. The stars above the medieval sky twinkle faintly in a sea of black velvet, and the moon hangs full and round like a silent witness to so many secret meetings, so many whispered goodbyes. Tonight we continue our story of medieval love, strange customs, and the soft ache of hearts beating beneath chainmail, woolen dresses, and embroidered veils. Let us walk now down a winding forest path in 14th century Bohemia. There were so many beliefs like that, born from nature and nurtured by superstition. In Wales, lovers might exchange love spoons, hand-carved pieces of wood, shaped into hearts, keys, or locks. The carvings were intricate and secretive, and each symbol meant something. A key for unlocking one's heart, a chain for loyalty, a wheel for support. These gifts weren't flashy, but they were deeply personal tokens of affection in a world that rarely allowed direct expression. And though a love spoon might seem small, it spoke volumes. After all, to carve one took time, effort, and patience, all things needed for love to last. In Spain, during the height of the Reconquista, courtship became an act of bravery, and still, marriage remained transactional. In towns along the coast of Flanders, there was an old superstition. If a girl swept her doorway 3 mornings in a row at sunrise without speaking a word, let us return for a moment to the courts of France, where the art of love was turned into a kind of language. Even outside the noble circles, women had to be cautious. A single misstep could ruin a reputation, and when hands did touch, it was never forgotten. Let your breath slow again. Feel how still everything is around you. We've wandered through forests, courts, and marketplaces, but there is more still to see. Sink deeper now. The room is still, the fire is gentle, and your breath is soft and slow. Let the weight of your blanket cradle you as though you were wrapped in wool inside a wooden cottage, far from the noise of the world. The sun has set, but there is movement in the night, a quiet knocking on shutters. A soft tune hummed beneath a window. This was the custom known as bundling. In some rural places, particularly in the Celtic regions, a young man would be invited to spend the evening with a girl he hoped to marry. A girl seeking love might place an apple beneath her pillow and sleep on it for 3 nights. On the 4th day, she would offer the apple to the boy she fancied. And yet, in Iceland and parts of Scandinavia, old stories tell of girls who tested their lovers before marriage, not with words, but with clever riddles. In certain parts of Eastern Europe, particularly among Slavic peoples, young men had to prove their worth by completing a series of tasks for the bride's family. He might be asked to chop wood, carry water, build a fence, or cook a meal. Under lanterns strung across barns, beside bonfires built from fallen branches, boys and girls would take each other's hands and spin across packed dirt floors. There was laughter, clapping, a bit of teasing. It was one of the few moments when bodies could touch in public, when glances could linger, and when hearts could race without fear. Some marriages began with those dances. Others began and ended in the same night, like a spark that glowed and then faded. But always there was something sacred in the rhythm of 2 people moving in time under the open sky. These weren't grand quests, but humble, everyday labors. The point wasn't strength, it was patience, dedication, humility. The sounds of the past are gentle tonight, soft footsteps on stone, a string plucked on a lute, the rustle of linen as a letter is folded and sealed with wax. We still have more to explore, the matchmaking rituals, the strange beliefs about dreams, and the many little things people did to hold on to love when everything else was arranged by others. If the boy grumbled or gave up, the match was reconsidered. But if he completed every task with grace, he was welcomed. Love in this world wasn't just about longing, it was about labor. These riddles often had double meanings, half romance, half caution. A man who answered too boldly risked seeming vulgar. Too modest, and he seemed dull. The right answer struck a balance suggesting wit, passion, and respect. It was a quiet test, passed by listening, not just speaking. If he accepted and took a bite, it meant he returned her affection. If he refused or ignored the gift, her feelings would remain unspoken. It was a small ritual, simple, silent, and heartbreakingly human. And even now, across centuries, we understand the hope tucked inside that little piece of fruit. They would lie together in bed, but not in sin. In many regions, the celebration stretched for days. Bread was baked in great wheels. Mead and ale flowed freely. Songs were sung in old tongues, some of them bawdy, some of them blessings. One lesser-known tradition took place in parts of France and Germany, the bed blessing. After the wedding feast, before the couple was escorted to their room, a priest or elder would offer prayers over the bed itself, blessing it with holy water or herbs like sage and marjoram. This was meant to ensure fertility, peace, and protection from spirits. In some homes, the bedposts were tied with red ribbons to guard against misfortune. It was as if the very air around the couple needed to be purified before love could unfold. Often fully clothed or separated by a bundling board, the couple would spend the long, dark hours talking, bonding, and growing familiar. The belief was that intimacy of the heart, not just the body, mattered most. It was a way for them to test compatibility, though the risk was always present, and so was the temptation. In some regions it was accepted. In others it was scandalous. But in many cold and quiet homes, bundling was a small flame of freedom. The rain taps lightly on a shuttered window. A wind chime sways above the doorway, and time, as always in these stories, begins to blur. You are safe in the hush of the past, wandering through the odd and tender pathways of love in the Middle Ages. The world of medieval dating customs is vast and full of surprises, and in this part of our story, we'll wander deeper into the strange beliefs and rituals people once used to find and keep love. Let us step now into a narrow village lane in 15th century Ireland. In northern Italy, especially in the city of Florence, families seeking to arrange marriages turned to astrologers. The stars were believed to shape destinies, and no respectable match could proceed without first consulting the heavens. Birth charts were drawn, the positions of Mars and Venus examined, and compatibility debated not with emotions, but with numbers, symbols, and sky maps. If the stars disapproved, the wedding might be postponed or altered. Some lovers even waited for a specific hour to make their vows, an auspicious minute when the sun and moon stood in harmony. Imagine planning a wedding not for spring or summer, but for a Tuesday at exactly 2:17 p.m., because the stars whispered it was best. Astrology wasn't the only influence. In parts of Bavaria and Swabia, there was a curious custom involving apples. Weddings, when they finally arrived, could be both joyous and overwhelming. The idea of purity was complex in medieval times. Virginity was prized in brides, but rarely in grooms. There were other trials, too, and yet, for all the customs and trials and rituals, sometimes it was as simple as a dance. At village festivals, especially during harvest season, there were moments when music played and rules softened. Drift now like smoke curling toward rafters. Let the hush of this distant world wrap around you. Let yourself drift even further now. Your thoughts are floating like feathers in still air. The fire is low but steady, glowing warm against ancient stones. Outside, the wind sighs through the trees, as if reciting lullabies in a language long forgotten. Your breath, slow and steady, begins to match the rhythm of the past, soft, slow, and full of wonder. This gave rise to countless small rituals meant to encourage a vision of love while asleep. But come springtime, when snow melted and roads cleared, whole communities would gather for May bride festivals. On long autumn evenings, young women would gather in groups to spin wool by firelight, telling stories and singing songs. But one night each month, a boy just one would be invited to sit in the circle, his presence considered a blessing. Runic singing, passed from elder to child, was used to express everything from grief to flirtation. A boy might compose a simple melody, etched with longing, and hum it near the girl's cottage. She might answer the next day with a different verse. These quiet exchanges could go on for weeks, entire romances unfolding in melody alone, without a single word spoken aloud. The ceremonies meant to bind lovers for life, and the stories of those who risked everything just to hold someone's hand in the dark. Villagers knew these songs. They heard them in the fields and by the river, but they didn't interfere. Songs they believed were sacred, and to interrupt a love song was to invite loneliness upon yourself. The girls would continue spinning, but they would glance, laugh, flirt gently with words and glances. The chosen boy was not expected to speak much, only to observe, to honor, to admire. It was a sacred exchange. A simple pouch of herbs, often containing rosemary, yarrow, or vervain, might be tied around the neck or wrist. Pieces of coral were worn to ward off jealousy. Small bits of parchment inscribed with Latin prayers were sewn into clothing. Some even whispered their beloved's name into a stone and then carried it in their pocket for luck. These small acts, done in secret, held great meaning. They were gestures of hope in a world full of uncertainty. If he behaved with grace, one of the girls might slip him a ribbon or a thread from her spindle as a token. Hear the hush of a spinning wheel, the low hum of a love song carried on the wind, the faint scent of rose petals crushed into cloth. Love in the Middle Ages was not flashy or fast. It was layered, slow, often hidden, and because of that, it was deeply cherished. That thread, often kept in his tunic or worn around his wrist, became a promise or a wish. Girls would wear flower crowns, and boys would parade with carved wooden staves. Games were played, riddles exchanged, songs sung in dialects older than writing. And at the end of the day, a symbolic bride was chosen, usually the most admired girl in the village. She would be serenaded, praised, and offered gifts. Sometimes boys competed to impress her. Sometimes she was allowed to choose her groom from among the contenders. Though it was all in play, the emotions were very real. Many couples from these games ended up truly wed by the following spring. One custom involved placing time beneath the pillow. Another required the sleeper to fast and recite a charm in candlelight before bed. Some wore small silver rings or whispered the name of a saint, and if the dream came, it was to be taken seriously. One curious belief was in the power of shared labor. A couple who worked side by side, be it in the fields and weaving or in tending livestock, was said to bind hearts through callous. The elders believed that love born from shared hardship was stronger than love born from beauty or charm. And so many courtships began with working partnerships. If you could survive a season of harvest with someone, you could likely survive a life. There was something deeply comforting in that. Something stable, something honest. People would search for the face from their sleep, believing fate had revealed it. Some married those people. Some never found them again. But the memory of the dream lingered, sometimes for a lifetime. Tonight we slip deeper into the gentle complexities of medieval love, into the rituals, the superstitions, and the quiet ways people tried to find something real in a world where so little was their own. Now picture a small, candlelit room in a bustling medieval city, perhaps Bruges or Ghent. Inside, a widow with clever eyes and strong hands leans over parchment, quill in hand. She is not a scribe for the church or a noble family. She is a professional matchmaker, one of the few in her trade. In some regions of Europe, especially in busy trade towns, matchmakers were hired to arrange suitable unions, not just for the wealthy, but for artisans, merchants, and even peasants with ambition. She interviews both parties discreetly, asking about temperament, finances, family reputation, and if she's kind, matters of the heart. Though arranged matches were common, these quiet go-betweens offered something special, the chance to be paired not only with someone practical, but someone compatible. Some called it matchmaking, others called it magic. Either way, it gave hope. But not all hopes came from people. Many came from dreams. In medieval England and parts of Scandinavia, it was believed that dreams could reveal the face of your future spouse. In Austria and the Alpine regions, the cold winters made socializing difficult. Far to the east, in what is now Romania, there was a hauntingly beautiful ritual performed under moonlight, the spinning circle. Even in the highlands of Scotland, among the moors and windswept hills, courtship had its own customs. In places near the Baltic Sea, songs were a love language of their own. And then there were the amulets. In many parts of medieval Europe, both men and women wore charms to attract love or protect it. Let your mind settle into that quiet now. Feel the softness of wool. Soon we'll return to the strangest beliefs of all the rituals that blended superstition with romance. Take another slow breath. Feel the weight of your body growing heavier, as if the earth itself were gently holding you still. Let the air around you soften like old wool, and imagine you lying on a straw mattress in a quiet stone room, the smell of lavender and warm wood drifting in through a half-open window. People believed in forces beyond what the eye could see, and when it came to love, they turned to charms, spells, and sacred ceremonies to keep hearts true or to win back ones that had drifted away. In Wales, there was a custom of carving the name of your beloved into an apple, then burying it under the full moon. If the apple remained untouched by animals and rot after 7 days, the love was said to be blessed. If not, it was better to forget them. Some believed the tree spirits watched over such things. The belief was that if they dreamed of each other that night, their union was destined. In some regions, love was put to public test. If not, they were never to meet again. During this gathering, young couples stood before the elders and were asked a series of strange, poetic questions. Would you warm his soup without being asked? Would you wait by the window even if the snow fell for 3 days? Would you share your bread even if he brought no coin? But there is still more to tell of farewell kisses on castle stairs, of love stories etched into the margins of ancient manuscripts, and of the forgotten names hidden in poems left behind on dusty shelves. If both answered with grace, the broom symbolizing the beginning of shared labor was gifted to them. If either faltered, the match was paused. It sounds humorous now, but for the people of the time, these were real questions about patience, devotion, and the kind of love that survives chores and silence. In Iceland, where isolation was common and winter lasted long, lovers sometimes carved matching runes into bits of driftwood, casting them into the sea. If the pieces returned together on the same tide, the sea had approved. If they never returned, the sea had taken the choice away. Others said it was the moon herself who made the decision. It was layered, secretive, ceremonial, defiant, hopeful, painful, soft. It moved like wind through wheat, sometimes bending, sometimes breaking, but always present. In every ritual, every song, every whispered vow by firelight, there was a desire not just to love, but to be loved in return. You're wrapped in the stillness of another world, one where candles flicker beside shadowed walls, and outside the moonlight pours like silver over sleeping fields. We are still walking through the world of medieval love, and tonight we arrive at the border where romance meets ritual, and sometimes even fear. You see, in many villages across medieval Europe, love wasn't only personal, it was mystical. A girl might braid a ribbon and place it into a river, watching it drift away with the current. A boy might bury a charm he once wore, marking the earth with a single stone. In monasteries, monks and nuns who had once felt the stirrings of love before taking their vows often planted herbs, especially rue, which symbolized sorrow and remembrance. Love wasn't always victorious, but even in heartbreak, it was honored. Couples would each light a small beeswax candle and dance with it, trying to keep the flame alive for as long as possible. If the candle went out quickly, it meant the love was fleeting. If the flame survived the full dance, it was said their bond would endure any hardship. It was a simple test, but it became something sacred. Some couples practiced for days beforehand. Others simply hoped the wind would be kind. Imagine the tension, the hope, the nervous laughter as the wicks flickered in time with the music. In Eastern Europe, love knots were woven from red and white threads and hidden inside clothing. Worn close to the skin, they were meant to keep affection strong and desire loyal. In Poland and parts of Ukraine, unmarried women sometimes kept a needle tucked into the bodice of their dress, blessed with a whispered charm. It was said to attract honest love while protecting the wearer from false intentions. These customs sound small, but in a time when little could be controlled, when life was short, uncertain, and filled with hardship, these tiny rituals became lifelines. Hope, after all, is a kind of magic, and sometimes love was judged not by the heart, but by the flame. In parts of France, during village festivals, a game known as flame dancing was played. Then there were the rituals that blurred the line between ceremony and superstition. In parts of Germany and the Baltic states, lovers might bind their hands with wildflowers and walk 3 times around a sacred tree before parting at sundown. It wasn't all quiet rituals. There was a peculiar event held in the countryside of Switzerland, known as the questioning of the broom. But what happened when love was lost? In many regions, especially in Northern Europe, there were quiet, solemn customs for letting go. Let yourself rest now in this gentle truth. Love in the Middle Ages was not one thing. We have nearly reached the end of our long walk through this strange and beautiful world. Breathe out slowly. Let everything inside you become still, like the surface of a moonlit pond. Your body is warm, your limbs are heavy, and your mind floats gently above the earth. All around you there is quiet, deep, medieval quiet. A time before electricity, before urgency, before noise. Just the hush of distant footsteps on stone, the creak of wood neams overhead, and the rustle of linen as someone moves in the dark. This is the world we return to now for one final evening walk through the curious, comforting realm of medieval love. Let us begin this part of the story in the scriptorium of a small monastery, where the air smells of ink, vellum, and burning tallow. You might not think of love here, but tucked into the margins of the sacred texts are tiny drawings, hearts pierced by arrows, initials wound together, and looping calligraphy. A miniature knight kneeling before a lady. Monks, forbidden to speak of love, found quiet ways to remember it. Some had known it before they took their vows. Others only imagined it. And in those small illustrations, we see what they dared not say aloud, that even those cloaked in silence carried fragments of longing. Love left its mark elsewhere, too. In England's north, in the city of York, a series of letters were discovered centuries later tucked away in the wooden panels of a merchant's home. These were love letters, handwritten in ink that had faded almost to dust, exchanged between a butcher's daughter and a boy training as a stone cutter. They were never married. His family left the city before the final letter could be answered. But in those soft, slanted words, we see something timeless. I hope this finds you with warm hands and that your heart is still pointed to mine. Words written without knowing if they would be read. Words written in the hope that someone somewhere might feel the same. Even in great castles, where power and alliances ruled marriage, true love sometimes bloomed quietly, carefully. There are tales of queens who kept pressed flowers between the pages of prayer books, gifts from childhood sweethearts they could never see again, of knights who fought not for glory, but for the chance to earn the favor of a single silent glance from a lady high above the tournament ring, of noble women who composed lullabies for children born not of politics, but of stolen kisses behind the rose hedges. Love within the walls of power was dangerous. But it happened, and it left traces in ballads and embroidery, in the quiet, unreadable eyes of painted portraits. Not all love stories ended in union. There were many who waited and waited. A sailor who never returned, a boy taken by war, a girl married off before the first snow. In villages across France and Italy, women who never married were sometimes called brides of the wind. It sounds poetic now, but it was whispered with both pity and awe. These women wore no veils, lit no candles before a priest, but they kept their hearts wrapped in memory. Some took in orphaned children. Some became healers, midwives, or caretakers of the sick. And some simply lived quietly, content to remember a love that had once warmed them, like a hearth fire in winter. They were not seen as broken. They were seen as faithful to something no one else could name. One final tradition, perhaps the strangest and most touching. In a small corner of northern France there existed an old belief that love, once truly spoken aloud, had to be buried. Couples who made secret vows beneath the trees would dig a shallow hole in the earth and whisper their promises into it, covering it again with moss or petals or leaves. The idea was not to hide the vow, but to protect it, to let the earth hold it safe. They believed the soil would remember what people could not, that even if time or war or distance separated the lovers, the ground itself would keep their promise. Imagine that, a planet full of whispered loves sleeping softly beneath our feet. So as you lie here now, wrapped in silence and comfort, let the centuries fall away. Feel the soft wool of a blanket that might have been woven by a shepherd girl thinking of her sweetheart in another village. Smell the faint trace of rosemary tied to a ribbon hidden in someone's pocket. Hear the fading notes of a song hummed on a country road, once meant only for one person to hear. Love in the Middle Ages was never simple, but it was always present, hidden beneath rules, written in the margins, buried beneath trees, sung into the wind. And now your eyes are heavy, your breath is soft, and the story has slowed. You've walked through forests where lovers carved hearts into bark. You've danced beside candle flames, braided thread charms, and whispered vows into the soil. You've seen the strange and beautiful ways that hearts found each other across fields of frost, under the watchful gaze of stars, and despite the weight of everything that tried to keep them apart. Let sleep take you now. You are safe, and the story will wait for you. Good night. Let your breath stay slow, soft, as if you were listening to the gentle flutter of a candle in a quiet stone room. You are deeply relaxed now. The air around you is cool and still, like the inside of an old chapel, long after the bells have stopped ringing. And yet, there's still a warmth here, a quiet thread that connects us to the past. That thread is love. Strange love. Stolen love. Soft love. The kind of love people whispered about across centuries and only rarely wrote down. Tonight we wander into the lingering corners of the medieval world, those last pockets of mystery and ritual where love and superstition braided together like ribbons in a maiden's hair. You may have thought the strange customs were behind us, but no. There is still more, and each is as tender, peculiar, and poetic as the last. In the alpine villages of northern Italy, there was once a practice known as window courting. During certain evenings, especially in spring, boys would come to the homes of girls they admired and sing beneath their windows. Not loud, boastful songs, but gentle, low melodies meant only for her. If she liked what she heard, she would place a candle in the window and sit near it, weaving or spinning in silence. It was a silent approval, a nonverbal invitation to continue. No words were exchanged, only glances, only presence. But in that stillness, something grew. This quiet ritual might continue for weeks, and only if both hearts remained steady would words finally be shared, sometimes in person, sometimes through a small note passed by a sibling or a neighbor. In more isolated mountain villages, courtship could take on a form both charming and chilly. During winter festivals, a young man might offer a girl a love sled, a small wooden sled he carved himself. If she accepted and rode it down the hill with him, it was understood that the two were paired for the season. These sled rides, fast and bumpy and breathless, gave couples the rare chance to hold on to one another in public, laughing as they tumbled into snowdrifts. Afterward, they would drink warm wine and share bread sweetened with honey or berries. It was cold outside, yes, but love in these moments felt like fire. In coastal regions of Ireland and Scotland, sea glass was considered a gift from mermaids, beautiful tokens believed to bring luck in love. Young men might spend hours combing rocky shores for smooth, colored shards to give to girls they liked. Green was for hope. Blue was for loyalty. Red, rarest of all, meant passion. Girls often kept these in pouches, sewn into their skirts, or strung into simple necklaces. If a girl wore the boy's glass visibly, it meant she returned his affection. If she tucked it away, he'd have to wait and hope. There were more whimsical beliefs, too. In parts of medieval Germany, girls performed something called dream walking before important festivals, the night before a major event like a saint's. day, or a town wedding, they would walk the edges of the village 3 times in total silence, barefoot, holding sprigs of mint or elderflower. At the end of the walk, they would sleep with the herbs under their pillow, hoping to dream of the one who would love them best. The superstition held that only those pure of intention could complete the walk without being noticed. If they were seen, the dream wouldn't come. So they moved like shadows, laughing only once the sun rose. In the cold forests of Lithuania and Estonia, stories were told of the weaving fires. On Midsummer's Eve, women would gather by the water and build small fires while weaving wreaths from wildflowers and grasses. Each girl would float her wreath out onto the water with a lit candle in the center. Boys would wait downstream, trying to catch the wreaths they hoped were meant for them. If a boy caught your wreath and the candle remained lit, it was considered a sign. Some couples met that way pulled together by drifting light. And then there were the love superstitions passed down, not by poets or monks, but by grandmothers. A lock of hair placed inside a prayer book could keep a lover faithful. A pair of doves seen in the early morning meant your beloved was thinking of you. If your right palm itched, it meant someone who loved you was coming soon. If the wind blew your cloak around your legs 3 times before noon, you would meet someone before sunset. These were little things, small, whispered beliefs. But for people who had so little control over who they could marry, they offered a glimmer of magic, a reason to believe that love could still be chosen. Now, let yourself lie still, your fingers relaxed, your thoughts soft. Imagine you're lying in a bed of hay in a wooden loft, hearing the slow drip of rain on the roof, the scent of old herbs hung from the beams. This is where our story rests tonight, but we're not done. We've spoken of rituals, of songs, of promises buried in soil, but there are still tales to tell. The poems no one finished, the rings never worn, the loves that left behind nothing but a single thread of memory. Let your eyelids grow heavier now. Let the air around you become still again, like a quiet meadow just before dawn. Here, carved into the wooden walls behind the altar, are hundreds of names, initials, and hearts, some barely visible, others deep and fresh. One tradition involved baking small charm loaves, especially during spring festivals. These were simple breads, flavored with herbs, and shaped into hearts, doves, or rings. During Shrovetide festivals, boys and girls would exchange rhyme tokens. These were folded scraps of paper with verses, some romantic, some teasing, some deliberately cryptic. A boy might write, girls baked them at night and offered them to the boys they favored. If the boy accepted, he was to eat the loaf by the next sunrise. If he did, the charm was sealed. If he didn't, the bread was thrown to the birds. But what made these loaves special wasn't just their shape, it was the secret ingredients. For many, these poems were more than fun. They were a safe way to test the waters, to speak desire without scandal. A baker's son might borrow a noble's tunic to speak to a girl above his station. A merchant's daughter might wear the plain dress of a servant to slip out unnoticed and meet her beloved in the gardens after dark. It was risky, but it was worth it. For some, love was the only act of rebellion they would ever know. And for the lucky few, the rhyme became a memory they passed down to their children as proof of how it all began. Some included sprigs of thyme, believed to bring loyalty. Others had fennel or poppy seed, meant to stir desire. And sometimes you've wandered through chapels full of names, past ovens glowing with charm loaves, through groves where trees listened to secrets. You've heard poems written in the dark, walked paths marked by stones, and felt the quiet daring of two hearts trying to meet in a world that rarely made it easy. A single thread from the girl's own apron hem meant to bind his heart invisibly to hers. These were the marks left by pilgrims who traveled for days to pray not for healing or wealth, but for love. They lit candles, pressed lips to cool stone, and whispered the names of people they could not hold. These were not graves, not altars. They were simply markers. A girl might place one stone each time her beloved left for sea. A boy might place one each month until a girl's father finally agreed to the match. If one of the stones was ever removed by someone else, it was considered a bad omen. But if the pile remained untouched and was one day added to by the other's hand, the love was sealed. Not by law, but by time. Sometimes they brought offerings, wedding rings that no longer fit, bits of ribbon from gowns never worn, even locks of hair tied with string. The priests rarely stopped them. They understood that love, like grief, needs a place to rest. You are so far from the noise of today, resting inside a world built not of bricks or stone, but of old traditions, candlelight, and tender longing. You're lying somewhere timeless now, beneath wool blankets beside a fire that's fading to embers. These were ancient, twisted oaks or elms that had stood for generations, always one near the edge of each village. It was said that if you spoke your heart's desire into the bark of the tree, then circled it 3 times with your eyes closed, the tree would remember your words. And if the one you loved came and touched the same spot on the tree, within the next moon cycle, they would dream of you. Whether it was magic, coincidence, or the power of belief, many swore it worked. There's nothing to do here, nowhere to go. Only the soft pull of another story from long ago. Another piece of the quiet puzzle that was love in the Middle Ages. We begin this next part in a small chapel hidden high in the hills of Brittany. Elsewhere, in villages near the Black Forest, love was not only about longing, it was about protection. In the hills of Provence, old women told stories about the whispering trees. Back in England, among the stone cottages and muddy lanes, love sometimes played out through riddles and poetry. By River Bend or Milking Gate, where daisies bloom, I lie in wait. My cloak is red, my boots are worn. Will you meet me ere the morn? If the girl answered in rhyme, the game continued. If she didn't, the silence was its own reply. Love in the Middle Ages often required disguise. In towns where class boundaries were strict, people sometimes borrowed clothing to appear richer or poorer than they were. And then there were the memory stones. Along cliff paths in northern England and coastal Wales, lovers sometimes placed small stones in carefully stacked piles, 3 or 4 smooth pebbles arranged beside a certain rock or tree. Let yourself float now in that space between history and sleep. There's just one more part to our journey. And now, you've nearly reached the end. Let your breath settle like dust in a quiet old library. Let your thoughts grow slow and loose, like vines curling gently around the corners of forgotten buildings. You are resting in a cradle of stories, safe, warm, and deeply still. In this final part of our journey, we gather all the threads of medieval love, its oddities, its rituals, its fleeting moments, and we simply sit with them. Like old letters unfolded at dusk, our story begins tonight in a small stone churchyard in the countryside of Denmark, where one curious tradition unfolded beneath moonlight. It was said that on the night of a full moon, a girl who wished to know the name of her true love could write a prayer on birch bark and leave it atop a grave of a couple who had been married for at least 50 years. If she returned the next night and the prayer was gone, taken by the wind, or perhaps by something more, she would soon meet the man whose name was carried off. The custom was both respectful and superstitious. The graves of long-married couples were considered sacred, full of wisdom, and close to the veil between worlds. Even in bustling cities like Paris and Prague, love found strange ways to slip through stone walls and cobbled streets. There were narrow alleyways known as whisper lanes, where lovers could meet without ever being seen together. They would each stand at opposite ends and whisper down the corridor. The architecture would carry their words, curving them around brick and beam until they reached the other's ear. It was said that one could hear a voice with perfect clarity, though only if the words spoken were true. If someone lied, the sound would never reach the other side. Belief? Maybe. But still, the lanes remained worn smooth by the feet of the hopeful. In the vast fields of Hungary and Croatia, there was a belief that geese could carry feelings. If a girl fed a certain goose every morning with the first bite of her breakfast and whispered the name of her beloved, that goose would carry her love to him like an invisible message. It seems foolish now, perhaps, but many boys would claim they knew, without explanation, when a girl had fallen for them. The moment would arrive like a warmth in the chest, or a dream they couldn't shake. Maybe it was just instinct, or maybe it was the goose. Elsewhere, in Spain's mountain towns, they believed that love was a thing of echoes. If you shouted a name into the hills, and the echo came back softer, it meant the love was kind. If it returned sharp, the love would end in pain. If there was no echo at all, it meant you were alone in your affection. Lovers would hike to the same places year after year, calling out names like prayers, listening for the answer only the stones could give. In quiet corners of Austria, old women taught young girls how to read candle wax. The custom went like this. You'd melt a bit of wax over the fire and pour it into a bowl of cold water. The shape it took would reveal the future of your love life. A ring meant marriage. A boat meant travel. A heart meant affection returned. A tear-like droplet meant waiting. These quiet readings, performed beside the fire in shared kitchens, weren't loud declarations, but gentle nudges of possibility. They gave guidance in a world full of questions. Will he ask? Will she wait? Is this love or just a passing warmth? And so we end, not with a grand wedding or a noble feast, but with something much simpler, something quieter. We end with the image of two people, side by side, weaving baskets beneath a shady tree. The girl is humming. The boy is watching the pattern of her hands. They do not touch. They do not speak of love, but she hands him a basket with one reed woven backward, a hidden sign, and he understands. He adds a knot to the handle, tying their secret together in plain sight. No one else will know, but they do, and in that moment something small and perfect is exchanged. Love in the Middle Ages was not what we imagine today. There were no dating apps, no weekend getaways, no bouquets delivered to doorsteps. But there were threads pulled from aprons and braided into talismans. There were songs hummed beneath breath, letters folded and slipped into satchels, wishes carved into bark, hopes buried in the earth. There was silence, but never emptiness. There was distance, but never absence. There was longing, always longing, and occasionally joy. And now, dear dreamer, you've walked every path. You've watched candle flames flicker beside wedding beds. You've touched parchment inked with devotion. You've smelled the herbs crushed between hopeful fingers. You've heard the poems, the songs, the soft sighs. You've walked alongside the medieval heart. Let it all go now. Let the story settle into the folds of your pillow. Let your breath deepen. Let your eyes rest. Let the old world fade like a tapestry in twilight. You are safe. You are loved. You are asleep.